celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks so much for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Leah Rutherford, co-founder of EMC Education Group, as well as Chief Executive Officer of Education Today Enterprises, LLC. An education consulting firm, Education Today provides educational support solutions for leaders, teachers, and coaches across industry lines. Additionally, they work closely with school district superintendents and principals to help at-risk students. In order to remain aware of changes in the field, Leah aligns herself with the Teach for America Alumni Association and the National Alumni Association of Spelman College. Leah also serves on the board of Sankofa Academy and as also a worship leader with the Bridge Fellowship. Leah has contributed to her community as an assistant project manager for Edmonton's Hearts of Love and was inducted in and is a lifetime member of the National Association of Business and Professional Women. She holds a lifetime teaching certificate through the Texas Education Agency, Way of Teach for America, and has become a state licensed life insurance agent through the Texas Department of Insurance. She also earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Natural Sciences from the distinguished Spelman College, and also continues the studies for the Master's of Business Administration at Houston Baptist University. Leah Rutherford co-wrote a series of dual-language elementary math workbooks through her recently established publishing company, Texas Star Publishing. The 15-book series entitled Targeting Star Math in Texas is available for 1st through 5th graders. Ed Today LLC is a multifaceted consulting company with expertise in the area of science. ET Enterprises provides services while partnering with school districts, schools, superintendents, principals, teachers, parents, students, and educational agencies. They understand that the foundation for all learning comes from concrete experiences, and these experiences create the pillars of prior knowledge that cognitive growth and development can be built upon. Now, to learn more about Leah's extensive background and how she and her team facilitate this extraordinary work, she joins me today on Close Up Television for this exclusive interview. Leah, welcome to Close Up Television. We've already had conversations on the radio, which is fantastic. I want to dig a little bit deeper in the work that you do and the passion for the work that you do so beautifully. Let's talk about the inspiration part. I like to humanize the guests. We'll talk about the nuts and bolts of how you do everything, but I like for the viewers to really get a sense of the essence of the person. What initially inspired you in your life's journey to do this extraordinary work that you do?
You know, that's a very good question, and let me say thank you for having me on the show. I'm
My pleasure.
Extremely excited about being here today. The work that I do was inspired just by having a passion for kids. I loved kids growing up. As a result, initially wanted to be either a pediatrician or a NICU doctor. I was in college. I remember having an opportunity to volunteer in the NICU, where often babies were struggling, obviously, because they were there. But one of the statistics that I learned was that babies that got human touch were more likely to pull through their health crisis and survive. And I would go and volunteer my time to just hold and rock and talk to and sing to the babies. What I actually learned in that time is that I didn't like the babies being sick. I enjoyed giving them the love, but I didn't know that if I would be able to have a career where I was having to heal sick babies, because I didn't like the idea that they were sick, right? Yeah. Then the next concept would have been being a pediatrician. And that was the track I was on in college, was pre-med. After the 5 years of college and realizing that I wanted to go ahead and begin a career, maybe take a break and then go back to medical school, I chose to teach. And that was kind of the pathway that led to the profession of teaching. From there, 30 years later, I'm still in that work. I don't feel like I ever had a push again to go back into the medical world, over time have realized that I've got philosophies that don't directly align with the medical world, if you will. I'm more holistic in my thinking about my health and my needs for treatment when there are medical crises and so forth. And so I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to kind of step back and see another perspective. Nothing against the medical world at all, just learning from my personal development that the education pathway was one that was more aligned with how I could leave my mark on the world. I grew up babysitting. I'm the oldest of two others and just have always loved being able to tutor or help or, give advice, be the big kid. And in the teaching world, I had the opportunity to have a lot of children that I could call my own, a lot of little sisters, a lot of big sisters and mentors as well, and people that took me under their wing and built me up to be the professional and the woman that I am. And so the education world, it has given me a platform to delve into many other arenas, and that therefore pushed me to continue looking for ways to build the community, to build other young people, to use my experiences, to have conversations. And teaching gave me that platform and that voice often.
So as far as the teaching background, I'd love to delve into that. What background in terms of teaching, what areas and categories were you teaching? What courses?
I graduated with a bachelor's in biology. It actually says natural sciences on my degree. And therefore, when I became a teacher through Teach for America, was placed in the science classroom for 8th grade. Go figure, my first content for 8th grade was earth science. So here I am, 23 years old. I had some 15 and 16-year-olds in my classroom that thought I should have been their girlfriend because, I was young, right? Coming from California into the South, where now you're called ma'am, and had the beauty of just a whole new learning experience. Because as a biology major, I didn't learn anything about earth science. So now here I am in a lower income area that was part of the Teach for America mission, was to take to take graduates that had a content specialty, science, math, English, bring them into the education world in at-risk schools, and ideally merge the pedagogy and methodology of teaching with their expertise in a certain content area.
Right.
And now you match that with a passion for wanting to give back to the community, and ideally you've got the best mix of a good teacher. And I think I brought a lot of that with me, but I certainly have to say I had huge learning curves trying to figure out now how I take this college knowledge, I give it to these kids in morsels that are palatable, exciting, engaging, and how I now learn a new content area because I didn't know earth science. Taking that and my passion, my zeal for young people, and being able to then say, okay, let me go read this earth science textbook, and how do I make this fun? How do I make it manipulative?
Right.
How do I make it cooperative? How do I take these kids that, are seeing this information for the first time, and it's probably talking about rocks in 8th grade is real boring, right? Figuring out ways to make it fun and exciting. That seeing kids turn from, this is boring to, was like the spark.
I love those stalactites and stalagmites.
Yeah. And when we were able to have those conversations, for me, it was teaching them how to learn it.
Right.
How do I teach them how to learn it? If we had to do it for a test, there's definitely a way to make this fun. I'm into, mnemonics and songs and memory devices. And so being able to take things that I could say, wow, I found a tool, I found a method, I found a song, I found a something that engaged Johnny and Susie typically the ones that would not do well in other people's classes.
Right.
I would often, as a first and second year teacher, get how did you get that kid to do that?
How'd you motivate them?
What did you do to motivate them?
Right.
I also had some of the veteran teachers say, can you stop all that? You make me look like I'm not working, and it's like,
wow,
that's interesting perspective. Can you teach me how to do this better?
Right.
And just learning that process, watching how it sparked kids to want to come to school.
Yeah.
I had kids I had to literally send home at the end of the day. Like,
They
I didn't even
loved it.
have you for the end of the period.
Right.
You're not even my last class. Why are you back in here? And having to call parents and be like, your kid's still at school, just in case you didn't know. Creating after school programs that were science driven, science clubs. I ended up starting to take kids to DC and New York. So we did end of the year trips.
Right.
And really becoming embedded just in the education process.
Right.
With the kids.
Right.
I became a cheerleading sponsor. We would do big events, even with NASA. We had contests like creating rockets and launching them on the football field.
Yeah.
I mean, I would find every way to make the kids in this community that never had opportunities excited about learning. On Earth Day, we would go clean up the neighborhood, and then I would give a prize to the class that had picked up the most stuff. The school was so mad at me because we would come back with bikes and tires and trash bags and trash bags and trash bags. But then the neighborhood was cleaner.
Right.
The kids we're walking down the middle of the street in 3rd Ward, Texas, cleaning up for Earth Day.
For Earth Day, yeah.
Those types of experiences, I still have kids to this day that will find me.
Oh, sure.
Will locate me, will see me. And they're the teachers that you see in the grocery store and you run the other way. I'm the teacher that they come find. Miss Rutherford, do you remember me? Those opportunities I don't take lightly, and I do call them opportunities because I've had the chance to impact their minds. I had a kid who was in medical school for neurosurgery. This kid inboxes me on Facebook and said, Miss Rutherford, we had a test today, and the bonus question asked us to convert from kilometers to centimeters. He said, I was the only one in my class of medical school students that got it right and got the bonus because of what you taught me in 8th grade on how to convert.
Remembered that.
Not having to use math, just using a strategy that still got you to the answer.
Right.
Another example of that was running into a kid. I'm in a whole nother city for a real estate training seminar. She's standing in line, I'm standing in line, and Merlin stops me and says, you do remember me, right? This is 15 years later. She's a whole adult. She was 13 at the time, right? And she was like, I was in your science class. Those moments, I just can't put a price on.
Can't script those.
Can't script them. I have kids that when I was teaching in Stafford, I had a for lack of a better word, a small petting zoo in my classroom. Iguanas, boa, like a 6 to 8 foot boa, a guinea pig, an armadillo. My classroom became the field trip for the primary kids. They would come do a walking tour through my classroom to see and pet the animals. That's what education is to me.
Right.
Bringing the learning to life.
Not
and
just the book,
sure.
right?
It's not just the book. You know, that's a guide. We have to focus on it maybe periodically to make sure that we check marked the concept. We got it, got it. Okay.
Right.
Now, how do we take those pages off that book and make this real life? And fortunately, I believe I was gifted with that as a talent, an anointing, a way to take the soul of me and give it back.
Conduit of the energy, right?
Yes.
Facilitator of that energy,
Absolutely.
right? Connecting with the kids. One of my favorite classes was 8th grade in earth science.
Wow.
Yes, in New York. And it was in the way that the teacher, Mr. Giles, had presented it in a way that was very engaging, like exactly what you're talking about. And some of my favorite teachers in school, elementary, junior, and high school, were the ones that were engaging, maybe a little warmer, brought you in, really valued what your contribution was. And as opposed to some where they're just really, okay, just remember the multiplication table at the back of the black speckled book, which was at the back of the book.
Right.
And people are like, okay, we'll memorize it, but how do we apply what we're memorizing? You can memorize everything, but if you're not shown visually, like what you're describing, how to apply these things and to be creative and add the artistic side to it, sometimes it doesn't resonate, but you found different ways because you were curious to think outside the box, which is really important, connected with the kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Earth science rocks.
Man.
Literally.
Literally. And I came to love earth science.
Yeah, right?
I had no idea that I actually enjoyed it. Ended up taking a geology course at Rice University, and we went to Llano, Texas to the quarries. We were fossil finding and
fun, yeah.
stratus discovering,
Yeah.
and, you know, bringing rocks home that today I still have and treasure. Pictures where if you imagine 20 educators standing at a wall looking at literally the walls right here, and we're like, there's a fossil, you know, being able to just bring all of this book talk to life. As an adult, we were excited, like 13-year-olds, learning about these different rocks. And it was like, wow, this is now, you know, when we talk about Pangea and tectonic plates and something's happening in the world and the San Andreas Fault and those things and the mountains that, you know, are inching up or inching down. Those
ocean.
Conversations are just extremely exciting, that there are peaks under the ocean that are taller than Mount Everest.
Yes.
And, you know, having those conversations with even my now 11-year-old, my 18-year-old, showing them that level of excitement, it translates into so many spaces for their thinking, that it becomes applied knowledge. It becomes problem solving. It becomes critical and analytical thinking. And then it translates to, mommy, I spilled water. Now what do I do? And it's like, I want you to turn on your problem solving skills. But those were engaged and enticed and heightened in just those moments when we were having dinner table conversations about the Atlantic Ocean, right?
Right.
It has made them better people, and beautifully, I get to see them as my own kids. Right. But before I had my own, every kid in that classroom was mine. To this day, if I am doing a project, those are my babies. Right. You know, I have been corrected by a superintendent. It's hilarious that I call the children, the babies are my babies. And she said, they walk and they talk. They're not babies. We're going to call them scholars. In my world, they're all my babies. And to have been able to still reinvent that over and over and over again for over 30 years has been a beautiful part of my journey in education.
So tell us how all of that background led to the creation of the entities that you operate now, which is exciting.
That's an exciting question to, you know, double that word, because it is igniting when I think about how much I've loved education, that I now do it as something that I call work on paper, but it's really just something that I love, that I get to do every day. They say if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life, right? 13 years into teaching, after being a lifetime and am still a lifetime certified science teacher, I decided to fire my boss and hire my purpose. I was a year prior to deciding to go this pathway of entrepreneurship. I left the classroom and began training teachers. That was my role in the district that I was in. I was training the principals and the lead teachers in the content area of science in my region in Houston Independent School District. And during that time, I had a chance to bring to light, get the ahas from the adults that I was getting from the kids. And they were like, oh, wow, Like, you can teach this that way.
Right.
This is how you make it come to life for the kids. And one of the things that I learned is when I'm in a room of 30 kids, they were in my room because they had to be, their schedule assigned them to me, etc. Right? And if they were impacted by this science education that they had to take because they were in this class for credits, then that was the outcome kind of passively. They enjoyed me as a teacher. We became friends, right? Because when a kid knows how much you care, then at that point, that's when they will work for you, because they can care less about what you know.
Right.
If they don't know how much you care. When they know you care, that relationship will cause the kid to do anything you want for them in the way of their own educational development. But even with 30 of them in the classroom, me seeing 150 kids a day, I may have been able to impact one or two of them to a science pathway where they actually did it as a career, wanted to be a teacher, wanted to be a doctor, etc. When I had a classroom full of adults, there was an exponential impact. One, because if adults are in there, they want to be in there with you. They want to take your class. They want to learn from you. Secondly, each adult represents anywhere from 30 to 150 kids per head.
That's right.
So now there's an exponential impact just because I am now training adults that can take away what I am considering a completely implementable strategy that's ready to use. They can readily implement this in their classroom, and now they've got something that I was able to give to them to impact their way of teaching, to impact these 30 to 150 kids per seat that is being taken in my classroom. When I was able to see that happen, along with, now let me rewind that and couple it with attending some seminars where I was like, oh my God, I know this could be much more engaging. Now, that's not to, poo-poo on the presenter necessarily. However, there were definitely moments, and I'm sure you've seen this, where I'm sitting there like, oh my God, can you please figure out a way to make this a little bit better, a little bit more engaging, a little bit more exciting, a little bit more fun. And I would sit and say, so if I were doing that, how would I have presented that to make that a more inviting presentation? From there, I would develop my school lessons as well as my adult trainings to reflect what I felt would have been a better way to present this information.
Were you always a personality? Were you always expressive?
Maybe so. I come from a family of performing artists.
Sure, yeah.
My grandmother was the choir director. She had 10 kids who sang everything from first soprano to bass. They played every instrument. We grew up having family concerts that were featuring our family. All of us sang, the cousins, the nephews, the nieces, the aunties, the uncles. And so I've always been in that world.
A lot of charisma. And,
I didn't really know anything different. I got to college and realized that people didn't have a cousin that could sing in their wedding. And I was like, you don't have a cousin, an auntie, nobody, nowhere in your family that sings? So yes, I think being in the front was always something comfortable for me. I didn't know when or where it would actually lead to a space when it was a platform I wanted to take advantage of.
Right.
I even remember having chances to meet the producer of a play. And I remember a producer of a play saying, hit the money note. And I shrunk back in fear. So I don't know that I've always had the confidence to just leap out there and say, hey, I'm a performer, give me a platform, hear me roar.
That's right.
But I've come into a space where I know what I have is valuable, and I have learned to become more confident about standing on that platform and having opportunities to share my story, my expertise, my experiences, to disseminate knowledge in a way that it brings ahas to people. And education was the place that I kind of found that voice. And then entrepreneurship was where I was able to cultivate and fine tune it. And so once I decided to, again, fire my boss, hire my purpose, that launched me into a space where I was now entrepreneuring.
Were you nervous doing that in the beginning, making that transition?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, okay, I, at that time, believe it or not, was a married mom of one, okay? During the transition of firing my boss and hiring my purpose, I got divorced. I, in the opposite order, I had a new baby, got divorced, took my mom in, and losing her world in California on the downturn of the economy at that time, about 10 years ago. I had withdrawn my retirement in order to make this leap.
Yeah, have it happen, yeah.
So at that point, I was making some very pivotal as well as final decisions that would burn bridges of security for me to push forward into this life that I now live. Burning that bridge of employment by removing my retirement fund was a very intentional but very cutting decision. I knew once I made that decision, I didn't have a backup plan. That was it. But I was confident that at that time, $25,000 is what I had in my retirement fund after 13 years of working in the education system. I was penalized $5,500 of that for withdrawing it before I was 59 and a half. So I walked away with a $19,500 check. At the time that I decided to actually go take that check, move my business from my bedroom to what I now call the boardroom, because I am in boardrooms across this country now, making decisions about education. I was with my baby in a stroller, negotiated a lease in a building, in a office building. When I spoke with the manager, I said, this is what I have. What do you have available? He had a janitor's closet that he was willing to rent to me for the year for what I was willing to pay out of the $19,500. I took that money and I marketed myself for a year by paying my rent in advance a year, my mortgage in advance a year, because I did have a house, my water bill and my utilities. And then I anticipated that that would put me in a position to earn money. It was a seed into what I now
planted a seed.
I planted that seed, knowing I couldn't live off of $25,000. That was less than my annual salary, right? Also looking at the fact that it was 13 years in and I only had $25,000, I could take the leap now, or I could hope this becomes something worth living off of 25, 30, 40 years from now. I knew that that was not the life that I wanted for myself. I took the chance. I didn't discuss it with people. Those that knew, of course, were like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Right.
And I was like, I am sure. Right. And to you, I might be crazy. But I can now say 15 years post that decision, I'm living some of my dreams. They're manifesting before my eyes.
So that opportunity that came and you took the leap was one of the greatest things you could have done by investing in yourself.
In me. Because look, when I'm looking at the fact that I got penalized $5,500, the government wasn't investing in me. We know we live in a system where you've got to do your due diligence, right? You've got to pay your dues. You've got to live out your time. And the system is designed for us to be able to get that money at a certain age. I knew that this was not the way I wanted to live until 59 and a half. I knew that there was a greater impact that I could have on the world of education and entrepreneurship. I knew that when I had that baby in that cart and I was, taking my business from my home into the office space, that I had to be in a position where I could present myself as a business owner. I couldn't do that from my home. I needed to have a corporate space that I could utilize when I'm meeting with clients, when I am having conversations and having to give an address. They have to be able to track that address as a business owner to a corporate address, not a residential address.
Right.
So being able to make initial steps to move forward with myself as a now corporation, from a sole proprietorship, from an independently owned DBA to a now corporation that is in a high rise, to a now corporation that is a partnership, to a lucrative partnership that now allows me to invest the max a year in a SEP IRA to cover myself for my taxes from that seed that took 13 years to build up. I am now doubling and tripling that in personal investments annually. I wouldn't have done that continuing to work in the classroom. And by no means would I have opportunities like sitting here with Close Up Radio, sitting here with you to have these conversations, sharing my story with the world, inspiring single moms to live their dreams, knowing that hybrid entrepreneurship is an option where you can work, build money, fund your dreams, and then eventually take a leap if that's your desire. It can be done. Strategizing is an important part of that process, and then desiring to see it happen and being willing to commit and stay the course. That is what has made this become a reality for my life.
Incredible. It's a very empowering and motivational, inspiring story for anybody watching who is considering maybe they're in a position where they're like, should I take that leap or not? It's very empowering to hear that story and that you did, and all of these wonderful things that resulted. You touched upon aspects of your own life that maybe you didn't even know existed by challenging yourself and by making it through all of that. Let's talk about the work that you do today with the company and some of the services you provide to the community.
Excellent question. So I mentioned a partnership, and my personal entity for which I am 100% owner is Education Today Enterprises, LLC. About 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to create a consortium with two other LLCs. That company is called EMC LLC, EMC Education Group Limited Liability Company, where the E in EMC is my company, Education Today. The M in EMC is my mentor's company, Multicultural Literacy Center LLC, and the C in EMC is Canon Educational Resources. Those are three independent LLCs that came together to make EMC. That partnership has allowed us to span our reach. I came into this industry as a science consultant, right? And my reach was kindergarten through 8th grade. Once I partnered, and let me put a plug here for the power of partnership. Many of us feel that we just need to go it alone. Partnership is what scaled my business. And it allowed me to do things today that I know not having partners would not have accelerated and exponentially grown my business the way that it has. Okay. So once we became the consortium company, me being a K through 8 science teacher, now we are a K through 12 cross content areas, and we do college and postgraduate support. Now that includes now all of the subject areas: ELA, math, science, social studies and writing, SAT prep, as well as any other support in the specialities. So now when I say specialities, I'm referring to students with special needs as well as gifted and talented students. What we have the opportunity to do is support anywhere from the student to supporting and consulting with the superintendents, and anywhere along that spectrum of mitigating solutions for education. So for the student, that may be hiring a tutor that comes into the classroom and works with the at-risk student that's struggling. Post-pandemic, many of our students are struggling, right? That also may include hiring a person that works with a teacher. We've got a new teacher that's struggling with classroom management, that doesn't know how best to teach this science lesson, how best to help this student with writing, how to intervene with the student who doesn't read, but they're in 4th grade, right? Who has a 3rd grader who's never held a pencil, a 1st grader who didn't go to kindergarten because it's not required. Those are some of the spaces where the teacher may now be struggling. How do I do that and also have a kid in my classroom that is a reader, that is accelerated? Now I've got this kid and I've got a kid that needs support. What do we do? Sometimes teachers, especially newer teachers, struggle with how to make sure they're still effective with students that are on different levels in their classroom. So we train teachers. We co-teach with teachers. We model for teachers. We come in and we are the interventionist in the classroom with the students that need the additional support. That's on the teacher level. Then we've got the principal level. We go in, we may be working with that principal on campus leadership decisions, campus improvement decisions, strategizing, looking at data for how they can get certain improvements in certain areas, targeting students that have struggled on previous tests, and we're able to look at that data. Being able to work with culture and climate. Yeah. You know, we're working with, now we've got this leader that's got the teachers, and we may not be having the best setup on the campus for the ultimate or optimum outcomes, right? So how do we get the campus to move when the teachers are struggling? That may be a culture and climate issue more than it is an education issue. So coaching the leadership of the campus. We work with community projects where we're able to go in with community decision makers that are working in the campuses, that are working with and around surrounding communities. We may do walks in the city where we're recruiting to get an additional population of students in a charter school that's just opened. We may write a charter to help get another school into a community that needs another type of schooling. And then we have the opportunity to sit in boardrooms with the superintendents, the ones that are making decisions for the entire district. And we can inform them about what we're seeing in the classroom. So we're able to give an entire gamut of views to a person who may not get a chance to go sit with Johnny in second grade, to sit with the first year teacher who needs the additional support, to work with the principal who's having a climate culture issue. But because we're consulting in all of those spaces, we get to sit with the superintendent and say, here's some data. This is what we saw. Here's some feedback. These are some things that we recommend. These are strong recommendations and suggestions for this teacher. Miss Wynn might be struggling. Mr. Jackson might be having this issue. In this classroom, we saw behavior issues, and this kid is the reason why. We probably should put him in another classroom. We're able to work along that whole spectrum, and that creates a continuum of care for the school district as a whole.
What are some of the things you see today that school systems, educators are struggling with? Obviously, like you say, the pandemic threw a curve that's still being figured out today. But what are some other things over the years, over the decades that have changed in the world of education, and what are some of the issues that they're dealing with?
I love that question. And I'm going to apologize to the bureaucrats as I say this. Standardized testing. Although it drives all of the work that I do, and I understand you got to have hard data, I hate that, and I'm using that word strongly, and I intentionally am saying it. I hate that it drives every decision that is made about how teachers have to teach now. I am a strong proponent of creativity, and teachers are having their hands tied by standardized testing. It doesn't allow them to be creative teachers and to create moments that are not so factory, assembly line.
Cookie cutter, yeah.
Cookie cutter. It doesn't allow as much creativity as I saw 20 years ago when I started teaching 28 years ago. There have always been standardized tests, but for that to now drive every decision that's made in public school systems, it prevents real teaching and authentic education, true opportunities for really creative learning to happen. When the teacher has to meet this deadline, you have to finish these standards by this test date, then the kids, which really have true questions, I know when I was teaching, I would question the kids, and that would generate the learning. Well, what do you think about this? Well, how could we do this? Well, if that's what you think, Johnny, and that's what you think, Susie, let's test it. And then we really get chances where kids are really now authentically, creatively thinking. They're definitely the ones who are driving a student-centered learning environment that the teacher is guiding. I heard a mentor of mine say, I want to be the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. But I believe standardized testing forces teachers to have to constantly be the sage on the stage, pouring this knowledge, give it back to me in a correct answer on a test form, and never really giving the kids the opportunity to think, to say, ask a question and let there be wait time. So, Jim, what do you think about today's current events?
Right.
What do you think about the forest fires in Canada? Tell me your thoughts. And then the teacher gets to sit back and really let the kids engage in true conversations. The teacher's comfortable with waiting and letting there be a silent moment while a kid is thinking, because you have to be able to think to give an informed response, an educated guess, a hypothesis. But I think scripting education, making it factory-like assembly line outcomes is leading to factory-like assembly line students. And it doesn't give us the opportunity to really see them create, to really see them go in the direction of their dreams, to really see them be inspired in a moment, in an educational aha that can lend itself to them growing. That, for me, is what I believe has changed. It, to me, creates the challenge, even for new teachers, because where they probably would be more creative, they've got to stick to this script, stick to this schedule, make sure the kids have the correct answer on the test. And that, for me, has watered education down.
You know, parental involvement is so important too, right? I have a friend, she taught 8th grade, and in a very well-to-do community. So the school had zero record of ever leaving a kid behind or even suggesting a kid be left behind. But there was this one student who, I think his name was Diego, very popular kid, very popular. They all loved him, sweetheart of a kid. He was funny, had a great personality, but he wasn't really doing the work. And the homework assignments that were being done, he wasn't really fulfilling them. And his test scores were not so hot either. So the friend that's the teacher, she was analyzing this, and she tried a lot of different approaches, but he just was a social butterfly type of person. And this, again, is 8th grade. So she looked at everything and she said, you know, I'm going to have to leave him back because he's not getting anything out of what is happening. Everybody loves him, but as far as the education and, you know, the absorption of it, nothing's happening. So I don't want to just have him go forward if he hasn't really taken advantage of what is in 8th grade. So she approached the principal, and the principal was not very responsive to the idea of really supporting the student in the way of saying, we agree maybe he should take this year again before we just push him forward to the next level. She was almost fighting the teacher on it. Well, you know, in this town, in this community, we have zero record of leaving any kid back. So if we leave a kid back, that's going to be it's going to be a blemish for us, and we don't want that blemish. So the teacher, the friend, went back and forth and back and forth. She was sleepless nights and not eating, and because she really was looking out for the kid and wanted the best for him, wanted him to really get as much out of the education as he could. And she was getting nowhere with the principal, who was really concerned with the record of the school not having any kid left back and the image of the school, which was a public school. And so she brought in the parents, and they're originally from, I believe it's Ecuador. And the parents came into the school, and they were hardworking blue-collar workers and new to the area, and they came in. She sat them down, she explained the situation, said everybody loves him. He's a personality, he's a wonderful kid. All the other kids love him, he's like their best friend, but he's not doing the homework. He's not passing. The grades are really sinking. I'm suggesting that he take this grade again, but I want to bring you in. She didn't mention anything to the parents about the school not going with the idea, but as the teacher, she wanted to bring the parents in. And the parents said, well, you're the teacher, and if you think it's best that he take this grade again and it'll help him in the long run, we agree with you as the parents. And that in our particular environment in our country, the educational part is not really emphasized. It's more when you hit a certain age, get out there and get a job and work. We don't really necessarily come from a background where education is really, at the top of the list as much as it is maybe here. So they agreed, and that was presented to the principal, and the principal said, well, if the parents feel that this should be the case, we don't like it, but we'll allow it. But what she had to go through in order to facilitate that for the good of the kid, where the parents agreed with her, was difficult and unusual to hear that. You come across things like that sometimes too?
Absolutely. And in that case, I'm glad to hear that the parent was willing to hear the teacher's side, as well as to support it in the best interest of the student. Definitely have heard that often. And what comes to mind as you were mentioning that, Jim, is the village. I grew up and there was a village. We had parents that worked together to make sure that kids had everything they needed. We had neighbors that were kind of a web of support, even for latchkey kids. There was definitely that space where we knew that we were safe, and the mom would be at work, but the neighbor across the street or the grandma up the street or the friend around the corner was a part of the village. And the school was a part of the village. Having that need is where we stand in far as gaps. When you mentioned that the parent was brought in and that the parent was able to agree with that as a suggestion from the teacher, I think that when that happens, then we've got the trichotomy that works for education to be successful. We've got the principal that came on board because the parents said yes. We've got the parent that was brought into the conversation. And we've got the teacher that saw the need in that student to ensure that the kid was supported and successful, and made the suggestion for what it would take for the student to be successful. When we've got a factory assembly line that's moving so fast, a lot of times the teachers don't have as much of an opportunity to really dig in and see where the deficits are. You've got a kid, you see a D, you see an F, and you just give them the grade and you keep it pushing. What's important is for the teacher to say, why did Johnny get this D? Why did Susie get this F? What do we need to look at to find out where the gaps are? Because as you mentioned, we all know post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, there were gaps, right? Post-pandemic, the gaps are just wider. Mm-hmm. So what's necessary now is the diagnosis and to be involved in the decisions that have to be made to make sure that the kids are successful. Kids are with teachers longer than they are with parents on most days during the school year. Right. So if that teacher doesn't see the kid, his outgoing personality may be his coping mechanism for not being successful educationally. Right. And that was him going along to get along. And it worked up to that particular grade. But being able to say, okay, but we want you to be a productive member of society. That right there is what is important. I call it the trifecta effect. Being able to pull all the pieces of that triangle together for that student's success. That is where it comes to a head. And what's necessary when an education system is working and the system is effective, we have all those pieces in place. And then that kid is seen. I have a teacher who will call me about my fifth grader and say, I was just calling because your baby didn't have a good day today. And I wanted to let you know, this is the incident that occurred. This is how she responded. These are the things I said to her to build her up. And I just wanted you to know. That is where pieces of education are missing, and where it's important that teachers are willing to see the kid, not the grades, not past tests. I don't like to say failed, right?
Right.
But not where they didn't have a point of success, but to analyze that lack of success and say, why? And what do I do to help? If that happens more often, we will have some of the disjointedness in the education system fixed. If parents get back involved in the place where we're able to have conversations without defensiveness.
Right.
And really see, okay, in the best interest of my kid, how can we move forward? That's where we'll be able to pull some of the disjointed, disconnected ills of the education system back to a place where the village is active, the kids are safe, and they're successful. Now, obviously, there are so many other factors that are impacting. I use the word safe, and I'm obviously referring to emotional safety of the kid. There are so many other factors where parents do have to be involved.
Have to get involved.
There are so many other factors where, there are ills that impact our ability to just entrust our kid to whoever is in charge of them. But if the parent is involved and their voice is heard, they become a force. Be visible, show up, go be the parent, the room parent for the party.
Right.
Bring the treats for the day. Come to lunch every now and then. Take off for your lunch at work and just go see what's going on. That is key. And then get to know the leadership in your campus. Make sure they know that you are vested in them as the leaders in the community where your kid is in school and in your kid's well-being.
Right.
It's got to be a continuum of care.
It's all connected, right? On so many different deep levels. You're right. The village, I remember even as a kid, that village being there.
Yeah.
The neighbors and even the school bus driver too was part of that. I mean, it was all, and you knew as a kid that there was the network of people watching out and,
Absolutely.
Which I think is so incredible to have. Sometimes I imagine when you're talking with young people, they want to know what is a good way to be successful. They'll see somebody maybe in music, on TV, in film. I want to be successful like them. And sometimes they don't always think that really being proficient with your education and really harnessing that while you can, especially in the early years, is a phenomenal start. That it isn't necessarily just an overnight sensation on TikTok or something. Right. That may be great then, but then what do you fall back on? Tell us about some of that and your role too as a consultant and a successful business leader is also very inspiring for others who want to sort of follow these footsteps.
There's always a story behind the glory. It's kind of like a weight loss success story, right? You just see the before picture and the after picture.
Right.
You weren't there when they were sweating in the gym. You weren't there when they were picking, sugar snap peas over ice cream. Having the conversations about the real journey is a critical component in young people understanding the pathway to success. I remember when I was on one of my phases of my fitness journey, I needed to show the process. So I started out almost 300 pounds and was determined that I was going to shift my life into a better space. I needed to be present for my kids. I decided to become a mommy later in life, and it's not fair to my children to not have me, which means I've got to do something different to fix this thing, right? I started by being on my stationary bike, 5 minutes on the stationary bike. That increased to 30 minutes. Then I decided to get a bike and go actually ride the terrain, the road, the streets. It led to me riding up to 15 miles. Okay. Literally, I was now from 5 minutes on a stationary bike where I barely could finish that 5 minutes to riding up to 15 miles in the trails around in my neighborhood.
Incredible.
What I did during that time was go live. I would go live while I was panting. I would go live while I was sweating.
Here we are.
I would go live while I was going up the hill and it was hard.
You were going live and going real.
I was going live and going real on Facebook. I would turn it on. It's like, okay, we're waking up and working out. That was intentional because I wanted to be able to say, okay, I'm 80 pounds down now. But y'all have been with me this past year. 2 years. You've seen me at 6 o'clock in the morning on my bike. You've heard me say, okay, I'm coming up to a hill, y'all. Let's do this together. When we look at success stories, two things. One, the real failures in the story behind the glory. And two is the story. You didn't just get to the after. You didn't just get to the success. You didn't just get to the notoriety. You didn't just get to the fame. You had to do the work.
You value it more too.
Absolutely.
When you've earned it.
And when you've earned it, you do value it more. But young people knowing you have to earn it is the important part of the conversation.
Right.
Because our babies are in a microwave society.
Yeah.
You can be a TikTok sensation overnight.
Yeah.
You really can.
Right.
But as you said, how do you sustain that? How do you live with that once you get it? What is it that you will have to do in order to develop and grow and evolve when this TikTok world is no longer? Because just like it comes, everything comes and goes.
Flavor of the month. Yep.
You know, we used to have cassettes. That was the big thing. We used to have, now look, vinyl is back.
Come back. That's right. Yeah.
But it went away for a long time. So what do you do in
Bell
order
bottoms
to...
are next.
They're back.
They're back.
You know, what do you do in order to sustain it, to retain it?
Right.
How do you evolve?
Yeah.
How do you adapt? And then what is the real story during this journey of success? Because it's going to have its ups and downs. You're going to fail. Walt Disney did fail.
Everybody did.
Oprah failed. Michael Jordan failed.
Sure.
We wouldn't know any of their names if they had not pushed through the failures, if they had not done the work, period.
And believed in themselves.
Absolutely.
Which is so important. You have to be able to believe in yourself, right?
Correct. And Think and Grow Rich, the book discusses desire as the first step to success. If you don't believe in yourself,
you have to. Yeah.
That desire becomes from self-belief.
Right, and there's so many outside influences telling us what we should say and do and where, and social media is a whole other mix now, and all these other, the internet itself. Tell us about how that has come into play in so many different ways.
Well, as I mentioned, I use Facebook as a mechanism to go live, to just tell the truth of, the process of growth. I'm always marketing. When your mouth is closed, your business is closed, right? And a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And so regardless, you might not get the support from your family. You might not get the support from your friends. You have to remember that your friends knew you when. They knew when you weren't an entrepreneur. They knew when you weren't successful. They knew when you were the one acting crazy in elementary school. They were the ones who were at the parties with you when you guys were 21 and 25 and etc. So now here you are jumping into your new world, your adapted space, your evolved you, and unfortunately, they're not going to be the ones that are just going to buy into now, I want to be a successful businesswoman. I want to be a entrepreneur. I want to leap into this world of my own business. And you were their coworker. You have to know that it's okay. Continue to be who you are on this pathway of growth and development. And know that everything that you need on your pathway has already been provided for you. Mm-hmm. You just have to continue to walk your walk, to run your marathon, Don't leap to the 5K. Don't jump to the 10K. Don't do the triathlon if the marathon is what your calling is. Because on the pathway of your marathon, I call them mile marker blessings. Every time you get to the next mile marker, you just have to get there. The blessing is already there.
Right.
You just have to get there.
Get there.
But if you leap over to the 5K, you jump over to the triathlon, you're never going to get to the mile marker of your marathon that has everything you need for the next mile.
Right.
But you got to continue to run your race and be consistent, be committed, and don't stop. You can't quit. We would have never known Oprah's name had she accepted that she was ugly. We would have never known Michael Jordan's name if when he got cut from varsity, he decided at that point to quit. We would have never known Walt Disney if when he was told his art was not favorable and nobody's going to like a laughing mouse. We would never know his name had he accepted that as his commentary.
Right. Right, exactly. You got to go beyond that and take that. And the journey is what it's all about, really.
Correct.
The journey is what it's all about.
Correct.
And it is a richer experience when you are earning it and you're creating it and you get these little boosts and accolades and mile markers because they're all there for a reason.
Right.
So when you reach whatever the pinnacle for you is, you look back and say, wow, the journey was really something that makes this pinnacle even more beautiful than if you just jumped to the pinnacle.
Correct.
Which is so incredible, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you wouldn't appreciate it.
No, you wouldn't appreciate it,
you
right?
leap to the pinnacle, you don't even know how you got there.
Then you're like, what next?
Yeah, and it would be building a house on quicksand.
Right.
You know, you've got to have the foundation. You lay the cement, you make sure that the steel bolts are in place. Putting up the walls are easy. That's the easy part, right? You got to have that foundation. And we'll just call the walls the success. We'll put the roof on top.
Yeah.
You know, we can get the Spanish tile.
Right.
But if you don't lay the foundation, it's going to crumble.
Exactly right. So how do people find you? Do you go in? Are you finding the school districts? How does it work as far as the connection that's made between your company and those that need the services?
That's an excellent question. You know, it started with relationships. So the beauty of what I believe sets my company apart in this industry is that it wasn't just the three of us that decided we wanted to put our resources together and go purchase or create a education consulting firm. We are actually all educators that just decided to transition into the consulting world of entrepreneurship in education. What sets us apart is that we are still current practitioners, all three of us in the world of education. We've got over 100 years experience just amongst the three of us. My business partner and I both came here in 1995 at the same time through Teach for America. Ironically, she from Tennessee, myself from California, and we came to Texas via the Teach for America Houston core. Our mentor, who is also our business partner, was my business partner's first principal. Mm-hmm. So she had been in education at that point, 10 or 15 years already. So what makes us so unique is that we've got over 100 years of experience in the education world just amongst the three of us. In addition to that, we evolved into the world of owning an education firm because we are still and have been current practitioners of education. We still teach. We still go into the classrooms. We still build curriculum. We still train teachers. And so what allowed us to now come over into this world of entrepreneurship was the passion that we had for continuing to do the work that we already loved.
Let's talk about some of the resources you make available too, textbooks that have been written and more.
That's it's such a fun conversation because it was just kind of something that back in 2014, we went to a timeshare in Conroe, Texas.
Been there, yeah.
Yes.
Spring, the Woodlands.
Correct.
It's a great area.
Correct. And we decided we would just kind of sit there and brainstorm. And it was my business partner, Chandra Cannon, our mentor and business partner, Ethel Lewis, and her son, Donald Lewis, and myself. And we, again, each were teaching in our own worlds. Miss Lewis was still principaling at that point. And she may have even been coaching principals and leading principals at that time. Donald Lewis, who is her son, was always working in education, but on the consulting side. So he never did a formal teaching job. He always was a consultant in education. And he just got that from being around his mom, who was a principal for years. Myself and Miss Cannon at that time were still teachers. And we sat around and did a think tank. And we were like, what if? What if we did this? What if we did that? How about we bring ourselves together and kind of create a moment? Literally at that table in Conroe, EMC was born, and then Texas Star Publishing, which is our publishing company that houses 15 math consumable workbooks from first grade to fifth grade that are dual language, Spanish and English. So when you talk about resources, that was birthed out of a conversation. That day we established the LLCs formally. We actually went ahead and filed them with the Secretary of State. Once we put in motion, when you say yes, God agrees, we put it in motion, what our desires were. We then were able to build a team. We got a team of math specialists that helped us write the content. We got a team of Spanish translators that helped us translate the content. And then Miss Cannon and myself spent countless hours in the office, in the janitor's closet that became my office space, formatting this book. It is now 15 different books, 3 books per grade level, first through fifth grade, in English, Spanish, and then there's a dual language book where you open it up and you've got English and Spanish side by side, a direct translation. For many teachers that have students that speak Spanish, especially dual language and bilingual teachers, the struggle often is having a readily usable translation tool to help a student who doesn't understand the words in English and or in Spanish, especially if Spanish is their first language. But now they've got to take this test, there's that word again, in English. How do we help that kid make that connection with this new language, this new concept? And then sometimes the teacher even struggling with that word in English because it's a math word.
Right.
How do we help the kid learn that particular concept effectively? Now, we do know if the kid is struggling in their own home language, that if they're struggling with concepts, they're going to struggle with those concepts in the new language as well. But having at least a tool that will help them make the direct translation has been one of the ways that we've been able in those elementary grades to assist with resources in the math content area.
That's incredible. That's really amazing. We're talking a lot about, the students themselves, but how do you work with the adults when it comes to education?
So obviously, when we're dealing with our students, the parents send us the best that they have. When a kid is sitting in the classroom, we've got the best that that parent had to give us. When we're struggling with a student that's in that classroom, then we have to be able to say, what is the core of this struggle? Are there needs that this kid has that haven't been met? When we're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Can't give a kid a math concept if that kid's stomach is empty.
Right.
I can't expect him to learn the Pythagorean theorem and the baby didn't have dinner last night.
Yeah.
Didn't have clean clothes this morning. Needs to eat lunch. Didn't have breakfast.
Yeah.
Etc. May have had to sleep somewhere that wasn't the most favorable. Last night, even though you all gave me the space where I should stay, I still selected another location. Got to that location and it was not aligned with my preference for how I stay when I travel. And for a moment, I was humbled. Simply because I was so caught up in not having the luxuries of my typical stays. The TV was glitchy and it wouldn't go on the station that I wanted. I'm not even a TV watcher, but it was for my daughter who was with me. The The room that we originally got needed to be moved to another room. At this particular hotel, they gave me what was considered the best room of their particular hotel, but it didn't meet what I normally would stay in and just standard rooms, right? And in that moment, as we pulled out the sleeper bed and the bottom of the sleeper bed fell through, so it was a safety hazard, right? I was like, okay, we can't sleep in this.
Did you go live on Facebook with this?
Oh my God, no, I did not. I was like, okay, this isn't quite what I expected. I sat with my daughter and we talked about it for a minute. And I said, this for some kids would be the best that they have today. This for some kids would be what they wish they had
or in a
today.
Hotel, right?
We have a place to sleep. We actually have food that we went out and purchased to have something to eat this evening.
Running water.
There's water for us to bathe in this space. And we're able to rest tonight. I don't want you to sleep on the sleeper sofa because I don't want you to fall through it. I'm not going to go complain again and get another room. This was like our third room that we ended up moving into when we got there for several different reasons. And it gave me a moment to say, there are kids that have to come to school from environments worse than this. And they still need an equitable opportunity to be educated. And many of those students can't get a math concept because 5 of them were in that 1-bedroom hotel room. Uncle was in and out all night. 4 of them were on the floor. They couldn't eat this morning because there wasn't food available. I've heard a story of a young family. The little girl, one of the little girls in the family, she got burned from her hand all the way up to the back of her shoulder because her and her 4 siblings and their mom was staying in a subpar hotel space. The mom was frying food on an open flame burner, and the grease fell off of the open flame burner, and the young child caught the grease all the way up her back. So she's got this burn that goes from her hand all the way up her back, in the name of survival. I was extremely humbled as I slept in that space last night. More so because so many kids in the neighborhoods and the schools that my work is called to live in environments that are similar to that and worse. What is so important in those moments when I'm working with parents is to understand the level of need that they may have that has to be met before I can come to them and say, well, your kid is not doing this. There are parents that have fundamental needs that need to be met. They may need to be taught how to read. They may need support with job placement. They may need to know how to do a resume. They may need to know how to translate this information because their home language may not even be Spanish or English. Our world in America has become a melting pot, and the education system is really the foundation of how to ensure that this pipeline to student success includes parent success. When I get a chance to go into the community and volunteer my time, I am making myself a model. Now, granted, as an entrepreneur, I've got the freedom to do that. So what I choose to do is take full advantage of the fact that I can go to be the field trip chaperone. I can show up at the kids' party and help the teacher. But I also like I did this past week. When there were extra snacks left over, I said, can I take these to the homeless in the community? I have a lot of philosophies surrounding how we can help build the community when it comes to the needs of our parents. But it begins with the understanding that many times what we see in those classrooms is a reflection of the best that the parent has to offer. And a lot of times, I know for me, I consider my kids the best parts of me. They're actually sending better than what they have to that school. Where we've lost the connection in the village is the trust that would allow us to go knock on the door and say, Mrs. and Mr. So-and-so, how can I help? And being able to step into that space is gonna need to happen if we're going to help fix some of the shifts that are happening and the ground that we're losing when we are looking at our children that are struggling.
Why do you love this work so much? It's obviously, it runs through your veins. It's part of your DNA. What is it about this work that you've been doing for such a long time, as you've outlined the early inspirations you've had in your life? What is it about the work that still resonates with you, and some of those blessings and joys that you get out of facilitating this work as you inspire others?
I still have children of my own. And I consider someday they are going to need to be in a position where they can take care of other people.
Right.
It's one thing when you're taking care of yourself, but they're going to need to be able to take care of other people. And I don't mean from a standpoint of any predatory prey relationships, right? I mean from the standpoint of this world is a cycle and we're connected. Our life cycles require that we give back in order to build and grow and get. And if we haven't been given the tools that are necessary to be able to give back, then we can't continue to build and grow within ourselves. So when I look at the fact that I still have children of my own, it's my responsibility for them to not be a burden on society. I've got to give them what's necessary for them to be able to go out here in this world and take care of, namely, one, themselves, so that they're not a burden on society, on the systems that are set up to support people to transition into society successfully, whether that's governmental support, I've been there, whether that's governmental aid, I've been there. I had both of my children on government support, both of them, 7 years apart. I still needed help from the government to birth those children into my world. I got women, infants, and children support. I went monthly and was getting my WIC bag of food and formula. I was on Medicaid to have my children because my income didn't support and sustain me. My then husband's insurance, go figure, didn't have maternity. I didn't have $10,000 to give to my OB-GYN for the duration of the pregnancy and the 6-month postpartum support. So I have been that mom, getting the government support that was needed for me to be able to have children, right? And to be able to support children. I had food stamps that were helping me get food in my household. When my mother came to me with no income and I went from being a married mom of one to a single mom of two and a caretaker for my mom, there were days that I didn't know how we were going to make it. Ensuring that my kids are not a burden on society in any way is step number one. And that is why I'm still so connected to education, because I know I have a voice, not just from a successful entrepreneur businesswoman standpoint that is giving the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. You keep should, and you're going to should all over yourself, right? So I'm not going to be shoulding at people.
I like that. Write that down.
I'm going to say, this is what I had to do to pull myself up by my bootstraps and make this happen. And now it is my responsibility that my kids know how to ensure that they don't have to come through some of the same dark spaces that I went through,
Right.
and that this is what they're going to have to do to be okay. So that drives me in the world of education, because I know that there are parents that still need that support.
Right.
They still need that aid. But then it's my responsibility to help Johnny to not continue to be a burden on society when he is properly educated. That can be one of the steps that prevents that from happening.
Right.
That's what drives the work that I do, because it is important to me that we are able to cure some of the ills of society through education. And because I have the vantage point of sitting at the same table with the student as I can sit across from the table with a superintendent, and I can be at tables with city council members and decision makers, then I know this voice can impact the way that education is seen. Even if it starts with just the little private school or the neighborhood charter school, or creating a charter of my own where I am on the board and I can have conversations that will dictate change. Being a change agent is why I'm still in this work.
Extraordinary work that you're doing. It's really incredible on so many different levels. What do you see as the future of this work?
I was just having this conversation last night. My business partner and I are best friends of 28 years, by the way. We have a very strong sisterhood, and I'm blessed and grateful that it has evolved into a business partnership. We were laughing because, and I'll get back to that question, but this is an important part of that. I remember us being on one of our tours as early educators, and I can't remember exactly where we were going, but we were on a yellow school bus. We're sitting next to each other, and as 23-year-olds in the alternative certification program, our income was about $23,000 a year. Okay. And I'm not the best saver. I try to be, but I promise there's an emergency that's going to come up, and that savings account is going to go to the emergency. I remember sitting next to her and saying, "Can I just give you $20 from my paycheck each time I get paid, and you put it away for me? Because I don't want to see it in my bank account. I don't want to have access to it. I just need it to be somewhere where I don't know it exists."
Right.
That conversation I had with her 2 days ago was about where we're about to invest our monies as we move forward into this next year. And the beauty of it was like, look what $20 turned into. So where I see us going, A, is being able to teach young people that you got to start somewhere. And then B, being able to show them where that somewhere can lead you to. We're looking at train the trainers, being able to take our pedagogy and methodology of teaching, engaging lessons into other industries. Let's just say the oil industry, the IT world, etc., and being able to be the trainers for their onboarding of new employees, being able to work with the HR departments for disseminating trainings to their live audiences in the moments when that is necessary. You know, in the AI world and the world of video conferencing, you don't always have to have a live audience, but it is still a necessary part of interacting.
Absolutely.
And so that's one of the arenas that we see ourselves going into, is using the Train the Trainer platform across industry lines. Though that's about being able to build relationships. And you mentioned, like, how do people learn about us? It's about the relationships that we build, the word of mouth, that we had good experiences with EMC or with Ed Today or with Canon Educational Resources. Principals talk to each other. Principals are friends. They were in academies together. They were in school together. You know, they were getting their masters and their PhDs together. And when they know something works, they're going to tell their other principal friends. who will
Right.
tell their other principal friends.
Right.
When there's success, success breeds success and your reputation precedes you.
Yes.
And data doesn't lie.
Right.
And so you pull out numbers and you say, these people created this success for my campus. So that's one of the ways that we get to build and work. Well, in the trainer world, the same thing happens. It's not like I can go on to Shell's website and apply to be a trainer for their HR department necessarily, but we can begin to build those relationships to ensure that we're able to bring some of these engaging trainings, conversations, lessons, workshops into the world of other industries. The next place I see us going is into the world of public speaking. Teachers are some of the best speakers in the world, but because we don't get the notoriety that other fields and industries receive, we a lot of times don't get the opportunity to use the platform to really show our skills, our skill set, our expertise, to engage audiences in interesting and engaging conversations. Some of the best conversations that happen in the world happen in the classroom, but they're not taped.
Right.
Unless it turns into something that goes viral that's not positive. But if that happened more often, then imagine what those conversations could look like. So we definitely want to be in the world of public speaking. And then we're looking at some passive forms of investing. So automatic car washes, self-storages, some of those particular ways that we can look at real estate, but more on like Airbnb side, not necessarily to purchase to rent per se, but something that's going to do some flipping and quick ROIing, generating capital and so forth. And then from there, we are, and this is another space of my expertise that I'm building, looking into the financial literacy world. So reading the book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? Learning how to take our income and strategize for our family trusts, what are called dynasty trusts, family trusts, and business trusts, and letting our companies purchase those index universal life insurance policies to ensure that our children are able to take care of their lives. That is the next phase of how we intend to take the $20 that I used to put in savings and now put it into our commas.
That's exciting, huh?
It's very exciting. It's very
cool
exciting.
Stuff. This was really great having you come so we can really delve in deeper into your world and why you love doing what you're doing so much and have been really invested in for years. You're talking about the village, you're talking about the $20, you're talking about earning it, you're talking about respect and really taking time to understand what life's all about. And it seems like you've continued this journey in that vein, which I think is a beautiful thing. So this was great having you come to the studio and really be open and real and authentic like you are and sharing it with all of us on Close Up Television. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Hope you did too.
This has been absolutely amazing. I would not have wanted it any other way. I appreciate that we got connected the way that we did and that, here on June 7th, I'm sitting in the studio with you, ready to do a little bit of East Coast touring and utilize this as an opportunity to really have my story told. I consider myself humble and quite quiet, and I definitely don't talk a lot about the ways that I've been able to evolve and grow and adapt. But I believe it's time to share with single moms, aspiring business women, minorities that don't realize they really do have a voice and a platform, and educators that are looking for an additional pathway to utilize their expertise. I believe this is an opportunity for that conversation to begin.
It is. It is, absolutely. And let's toast on that, right?
Yes.
Let's toast on that. Good stuff.
Great tea.
Continued success. Definitely stay in touch, and let's continue to hear more about your journey and the incredible impact you're making, long-lasting impact in the lives of so many. Thanks for being with us, Leah.
Thank you, Jim.
Pleasure.
If you'd like to learn more about Leah Rutherford and Ed Today LLC, visit this website, edtodayllc.com.
For Close Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.